You're listening to the weekly Dartscast, and now your co-hosts, one-time UK Open Riley's qualifier participant Alex Moss, and the one-time VIP guest of Barry Hearn, Burton DeWitt. 180! Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast. Alex Moss here, back as always with my co-host, darts statistician and a man who can run in any weather, Burton DeWitt. How you doing?
I wouldn't say any weather. I'm definitely not willing to go running in what we've been having out in Death Valley, California the past few days, record-setting heat. But I'm doing well. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well too, thank you very much. And up to episode 162, we probably should have mentioned this on the last couple of episodes. What's our favourite 160, 161? Probably a little bit harder to do for a 162, given that it's a bogey number. But have you got any favourite 162s regarding darts?
I've still never managed to get 3 treble 18s in one turn. I've tried before. There was one night where I just playing, if anyone's ever done a cricket darts, I just kept scoring on 18s and I kept getting a 7 count. So I still haven't gotten that 162, but eventually I will.
Fingers crossed for that. Well, personally for me, the best 162 has got to be Peter Wright, hasn't it? Hitting that 162 to leave the 140, which he then went on to take out against Niall Wellington at the World Championships last year. 163 might be a little bit harder on our next episode, but we'll give it a go and have a think about it. But another busy show, plenty to get into. Of course, we're going to hear from the Premier League leader, Glen Durrant, in a few moments. Also hear from the PDC's Master of Ceremonies, John McDonald. But lots to discuss, and we'll start with some darts that's coming up next week. The Premier League is back 5.5 months since night 6 in Liverpool back in March. The Premier League returns next week, 6 consecutive nights behind closed doors at the Marshall Arena in Milton Keynes. What are your excitement levels for the Premier League restart next week?
Fairly high. I mean, this is one of the most competitive Premier League, or was until the stoppage, one of the most competitive Premier League seasons we've had. I'm excluding Daryl Gurney, who never got going. First and eighth are separated by 4 points, and most of them are all about the same goal differential, especially once you get past the top 2. And it's just the equal level of the players. And this long break, we just don't know what to expect going back, but it's going to be, over the first 3 nights, critical matches for everyone. Obviously for Gurney to try to get back into it, but even for people like Rob Cross and Gerwyn Price, who have to think if they get a couple points would be safe, that's not their goal. Their goal is to stay in the race. You could be 3 days into this and maybe have only picked up 1 point. And sure, you're safe, but your season's already over, and you're going to have to go and play the next 3 nights in what are basically meaningless matches for you. It's going to come fast and furious to stay alive to make the O2 over those 6 nights. And I think it's going to be really exciting.
Fast and furious, 3 words that we probably wouldn't associate with the Premier League, given how long it usually goes on for. 15, 16 weeks every Thursday for the best part of 3 or 4 months is what the Premier League is usually like. This is going to feel a little bit different, isn't it? You've got 6 nights all consecutively next week, and then the following week you've got the 4, possibly 5, which we're going to go into in a moment to finish off the season or get to the end of the league phase at least. But yeah, like you, I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, when we go back to our preview show for the World Match Play, that was the return of darts to our screens, and both of us were a little bit apprehensive. We weren't quite sure what we were going to get, what the product was going to be like, but we came back a few weeks later on this show, reviewed the tournament, and we were both quite impressed with how PDC and Sky put together the whole thing. So going into it next week, pretty optimistic about how it's going to go. And the World Match Play was one of my favourite tournaments. The Premier League's probably, in my own personal list, a little bit lower, but we go back to 6 months ago now, and the 6 weeks that we did see, you mentioned it there, it was pretty competitive. Pretty much all the players in with a shot of getting into the playoffs or continuing on into that second phase of the season. Daryl Gurney's a little bit adrift, 3 points of Rob Cross in that sole elimination spot. But regards to the top of the table, Glen Durrant is only 1 point clear, then Michael Van Gogh, and then you've got 3 players a point further back. So it is pretty competitive. So yeah, for me, I'm excited to see how this is going to play out next week, and we don't quite know what all the fixtures are going to be like for the 3 nights towards the end of next week, but the first 3 nights that we've got coming up next week, there's some really good games to look forward to.
And of course, it's not just those 6 consecutive nights. After a couple nights off, the PDC will be bringing the Premier League Nights, I have to do maths now, 13 through 16, also behind closed doors, also in Milton Keynes on the 3rd to 6th of September. Still holding out the possibility of a finals night at the O2 in front of a crowd. Was moving those last 4 nights of the league phase to behind closed doors a good decision, you think?
Yeah, I think it was probably a sensible decision, and apologies, I was meant to change our spreadsheet because I was just having a flick through the PDC website before we started recording this on this Tuesday evening here in the UK at least, and the press release, the article that the PDC put out on their website with regards to the 4 extra nights they're putting on in Milton Keynes, that's now changed to the 2nd to the 5th of September. Of course, when they put this press release out to begin with, it was the 3rd to the 6th, and they said the possibility of the O2 finals night, if they can't have a crowd at the O2, then they will put it to Milton Keynes and have it all in that week, 2nd to the 6th. And given that they've changed those dates already, I think that's probably a good idea that it is going to be the finals night is going to take place in Milton Keynes the following week. And we don't know that for sure just yet, but I've got a good feeling that's how it's going to be. And I was chatting to Paul Booth, the MC on the show last week, who does the hospitality for the Premier League nights. He's missed out on a lot of work over the last few months, and he was hoping that we might see some hospitality, hoping that we might see the O2 go ahead with a crowd. And for me personally as well, that was one of the ones that I was potentially looking to get to when it was going to be held back in May and even in October later on this year. But I just think, given what we've got going on for the rest of the season, they're going to try and put on some more events. Want to try and get these other events on. You think of this stage of the season, there is a lot of events to get on. I just think we're going to see that finals night move to Milton Keynes as well and take place on that Sunday, the 6th of September. I think for the PDC, it's just one less problem to sort out, isn't it? And I know they've started doing the test events here in the UK with crowds. We saw at the weekend with the snooker and other matchroom production linked in with the PDC, the crowd, a limited crowd in at the Crucible for the final of that. So they're starting to do it, but things could change, and we've said it on this show countless times over the last 4 or 5 months. Things are changing on a very quick basis, and if we get to October and things don't go in the right direction here in the UK, they go the other direction and there's no possibility of a crowd, it's just another night that they've got to sort out, isn't it? Just that finals night to get those 4 players together and all the officials and everything, get the stage set up. So yeah, I think it was a sensible decision, and if it is going to go the way that I think it's going to go and they put the finals night there as well and make it the 5 nights from the 2nd to the 6th, I think it is a good idea. Just get it out of the way.
Yeah, making me look a fool, but on the other hand, it goes exactly with what I said last week, that we don't know what's going to change hour to hour, and this is case in point. Obviously, we record this unless we record on the weekends, we record this during my lunch break at work. So if something has just happened, I might have missed it, like this, the change in the dates. But I think it is the right decision. The only other alternative would have been to hold out and have the stage later, but when are you going to find that time in the calendar, especially to have 4 consecutive days, unless you throw it on to the autumn series on one end or the other, but there's televised events around that. So I think you had to make the decision now, and this was the only sensible move then. There wasn't any other time in the calendar where you could have put 4 consecutive days. And it goes with the other thing I said last week, and I've said before, that we need to cut down on travel as much as possible. This does that. And international travel, especially going from city to city for the European players to come over. Well, there's only one European player, but also Daryl Gurney, if he survives coming over from Northern Ireland, having to fly, it would make it very tricky. This cuts that out. This cuts that down. I think this was the right move. We don't yet know for sure whether the playoffs will go ahead at the O2 or whether it'll be on that Sunday in Milton Keynes. But the PDC will have to make that decision. They might have to make it over the next week. But I think this was the right call. And we'll see. Maybe an hour from now, everything we said will be moot because they've made that decision.
Absolutely. Well, let's bring in our first guest on this week's show, and it is the man who is top of the Premier League heading into the restart next week, and he is a 3-time BDO World Champion, Glen Durrant. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the current leader of the Premier League, Glen Durrant. How are you doing?
I'm very good, actually. A drizzly Monday morning, etc., but no, I feel quite good, and really looking forward now to the next few weeks, and hopefully get some competitive darts going again.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a busy one for you. And we last had you on the show back in February when we had a chat at the Premier League Media Day in Aberdeen. Could you ever imagine we'd be in August now and talking about the Premier League season being only 6 games old?
Yeah, I don't think anybody will ever forget 2020. It was all going so well. I mean, at least I can say I've tasted a Premier League with a full crowd, etc. I feel very, very blessed, but also feel a little bit cheated as well. I'm not playing in front of, certainly sort of Newcastle against the world champion, right on my doorstep of where I live. It's just been an unbelievable year, but I'm one of the lucky ones. There's people going through very, very difficult times right now, so whatever sulking I did was done very, very short period, and I'm just glad for everything I get at the moment, but a strange year.
Touched on the Newcastle night there. We're talking on a Monday morning. The PDC have just released an update on the Premier League. 4 more nights are going to be held in Milton Keynes behind closed doors. Newcastle's one of those nights now to be cancelled. What was your reaction to that news?
One thing about the PDC is the communication is fantastic, and I've been so impressed with the professionalism of, they're trying to do, the work in the government guidelines. Things change on a daily basis, and hopefully during this interview I'll give you an example of, just trying to get over to the autumn series and issues with flights and everything. But the PDC have been fantastic, and I got the news, was it maybe yesterday or the day before that, there was going to be an announcement this morning in relation to that. On a personal level, I just want the Premier League to be completed, so I can, I would hate for it to have ended mid-season, etc. So at least it's all going to be done and dusted. It's just a shame it's behind closed doors. It would be amazing to be playing in front of packed arenas, but that's just not going to happen, and you've got to adapt and understand the reality of the situation that we're in. So I'm quite pleased that there's a calendar there. It's going to be 12 nights, I think it is, something like that, at Milton Keynes behind closed doors. And who knows, I've been watching the snooker and the matchroom stuff that Mr. Hearn does, and maybe we'll get a time where we'll come to the playoffs and there'll be small crowds or reduced crowds, etc. But in answer to your question, I'm just glad it's going to be finished.
Just going back to that first night of the Premier League in Aberdeen, as I said, I was there and I was waxing lyrical when you came out to Elvis Costello, Pump It Up, only to find out a few days later it was the wrong Pump It Up. As a player, does that throw you all coming out to the wrong song? Or I know you went on to beat Michael Smith in that game, but did it affect you at all?
Yeah, I like that question, because when I used to walk out in the BDO, I reckon I used to gain 2 or 3% off the walk on it. Iconic song which Adrian Lewis walks out doing the PDC, and it's very much a Middlesbrough Football Club song, and the whole sort of Teesside, it's a very iconic song for us, and it used to lift me. I've not really had that walk on in the PDC. I've tried maybe 4, but the one I've always wanted to walk on to, for whatever reason I haven't yet. And Pump It Up is what my daughter sort of said, I think this is a great one for you, Dad. And when I stood at Aberdeen, I was like, what the hell is this? And I actually walked past Mac Elk and I was like, what is this? So whether it helped me relax a little bit, because I did play really well against Michael Smith that day. But some people say there's no importance. I'm sure if you ask someone like Gary Anderson or something, there'd be no importance to a walk on. But I just haven't found that one for the PDC yet.
And you couldn't have asked for a much better start to life in the Premier League, top of the league after 6 games before the season was postponed. How did you find those 6 weeks as a Premier League player and everything that comes with it?
Actually, very difficult. Even sort of in the back room, just who am I going to pair up with, who am I going to practice with, who you can, because people have built up relationships over the years. I'm surprised to see that Michael van Gerwen and Gerwin Price practice together. I would have thought they were big rivals, and so it took certainly a few weeks to sort of just get used to the whole process and the procedures that are in place and everything there. So and you sit and realise, one day I've got Peter Wright, the next week I've got Michael van Gerwen. It's just, I'm up there with the elite right now, and it's pretty fantastic. So the games I was looking at trying to win was obviously Fallon. I thought, if I play my game, I'll win that game. And I had a fantastic record against Nathan Aspinall, and they're the 2 games that I dropped points on. So it's been pretty crazy. But wins over, people like Gary Anderson, Michael Smith, they're big wins for me.
And we're gearing up now for the Premier League to resume behind closed doors in Milton Keynes next week. We've got the 6 nights back to back to back, a 5-month gap between Premier League games it will be. Has the Premier League always been not far from your mind, or has there been a time during those 5 months where you've been reminded about it and that you're top of the table as well?
Yeah, I mean, I love my Twitter and everything, so someone said I'm the 3rd highest player to be sat at the top of the Premier League, so it's it's always at the back of my mind because for many reasons, the moment I got told about the Premier League was an absolutely massive moment in my Darton life, and for it to be taken away halfway through the season was quite tough, and it's up there honestly when you're playing in front of the crowds of the Premier League. It's right up there with the top things I've ever done in the game, and it's very, very special, and it's a real privilege to be involved, and to be sat on top of the Premier League. It's been actually good for my reputation. I've had messages from fans who probably only watch the Premier League and Ali Pally. So there's a whole new sort of fan base come from people who are now watching me play, who've never heard of me in the BDO or things I'm doing on the Pro Tour. So it's been very good for the reputation.
And the last time we saw you on our screens was a few weeks ago now. We had the World Match Play, the first big event to take place since this pandemic broke out. Another deep run for yourself, getting to the semi-finals. Firstly, how did you find that experience of playing a PDC major behind closed doors, and the World Match Play in particular being away from Blackpool?
Well, the first part of it, I thought the PDC and Sky done a fantastic production. Honestly, genuinely, when I got there, it was. I felt when I was playing on there that there was a crowd behind us at times. So for me, it's all about the word adapt. And I've played in the BDO a long time, and won World Masters and Finders Masters in front of fairly small crowds under a couple of hundred. It's the World Darts Trophy, I played in front of 27 people. So I was used to sort of playing on a stage where you can hear the scraping of a chair, or you can hear something in the background, or so I felt like I adapted quite well there. But honestly, the production, the lights, the Champions Wall, I thought it was great, and I was there to try and win it. When you're beating Peter Wright in the second round and you're seeing all the seeds around your fall, there was a big opportunity for me.
Yeah, that was an impressive win against Peter Wright, and then the comeback against Vincent van der Voort to get through to that semi-final. And you said in an interview with your local paper the semi-final defeat to Dimitri van den Bergh was a tough loss to take. Was it the closeness of the game that was most disappointing, or something else?
I've never lost to Dimi, and I know he sort of looks up to me as well. And it was a game I thought I was capable of winning, and when you look at sort of self-reflection, and it was a real tough one to take, because how many opportunities are you going to get to win a PDC major when all top 4 seeds are out? It was a real tough one to take, and I lost to an inspired Dimmy. I was glad when I come off to see that we both averaged 99. It was a good game. It was just nip and tuck, and even very early I went in a 2-0 lead and missed double 16 for a 3-0 lead, and as early as that, it could have had a difference in the outcome. And at 9 each, I missed 2 darts to go back in front again. And then when I went 15-14 ahead, it was tough to take to lose. If I'd have got beat something like 17-7, I would have been okay. But when you dodge a bullet like I did against Vincent van der Voort, sometimes you think that your name's on the trophy. And I think that's why it was a real heartbreaker for me, and still is now, because the World Match Play for me is the one that was I was a BDO player. I went as a guest to the World Match Play and fell in love with the PDC. So that trophy, I felt, had sort of resonated with me. It sort of inspires me, and I would have been well chuffed to have won that.
You touched on earlier the autumn series. That's what we've got coming up after this round of Premier League games in Germany. A few players, including yourself, put out that your flights have been cancelled. What's the latest your end, and have you got any other arrangements sorted?
I'm in a fantastic WhatsApp group with the Geordies, Chris Dobie, Ryan Joyce, Adam Hunt, and we can't help but sort of laugh rather than cry at the moment, because we've booked flights via Amsterdam. So Newcastle, Amsterdam, and now the quarantine rules come in for Holland, which includes just a stop off in an airport. So we then looked at Newcastle to Heathrow, Heathrow to Hanover. That's now actually been cancelled. So, luckily I've got a manager, and, I'm going to let Mac Elkin do it. Mac said it's all in hand. He's got drivers in Germany, etc. And, you just concentrate. But I like to be there to try and support Chris and Ryan and Adam as well, because it's nice to travel as a group. But, they're the kind of things I guess people don't see. And, just getting from country to country at this moment, and which changes on a daily basis, is they're the trials and tribulations of being a professional dart player at the moment.
We'll finish up with a few questions from our listeners, and the first one comes from Stevie King, who says that you used the pear-shaped flights on your darts, but have you ever tried the standard-shaped flights?
Well, that is a very, very interesting question, and watch this space at the Premier League next week. And I've been using this time to tinker a little bit. I'm still using my Target Does a Dart, but it's a brand new set I'm using. So the ones I used in the match play were about 10 months, 11 months of play. So I'm using a brand new set of darts, and I'm also using a different flight, which I've been sort of tinkering with for about 6 months now. I'm expecting the final design to land on my doorstep tomorrow. Target said I should get them for Tuesday. So I won't be playing with a pear-shaped flight at the Premier League unless I have a real wobble. I'm playing Gabriel Clemens again tonight on an online match, and we had a good game with last week. He beat me 11-10, but he averaged 104, and the flight felt really, really good. So I could be going away from the pair flight for the first time in 20-30 years.
Interesting. Well, next one comes from Ben Hudd, who wants to know, would winning the Premier League top winning the Lakeside?
Yeah, I think it would. Like I said, the first Lakeside was spectacular, fantastic, amazing. The second and third, not so much. Even some of my semi-finals are sort of on a par to second and third. That feeling I had when I hit double 16 for the first Lakeside would be tough to beat, but you win the Premier League, I think you can look in the mirror and say, you're the best player in the world at that point. On that given night, if you beat Michael van Gerwen, Peter Wright, Gezi Price, if you beat players like that, then surely there'd be more job satisfaction out of winning the BDO. So, but like I said, that first BDO was very, very special.
Last one then comes from Charlie Gray. He says that you're his favourite player, and he says, can you remember what you did on your 21st birthday, as it's his 21st this Thursday?
Charlie's very special. He's looking after my Twitter account now, and I've tried to send him a few things. I know he's a big fan. At 21-year-old, I was working behind a karaoke, pressing play, pause, and eject. Darts was just a distant dream at that point. I was just working during the day and working on a karaoke on the night to, just to pay the bills, etc. So yeah, not very glamorous when I was 21-year-old. But I say to young dart players now, I didn't win my first darts title till I was 41. I didn't win a BDO tournament until I was 42. So my career all sort of come really, really late. So that's why I love working with young players that have got such an exciting future that they don't need to have it overnight. Some people are just born with an unbelievable ability, and some it takes time. And my story is about someone who it all come good. 45-year-old to 50-year-old. It's been a great story there. So I'd say to Charlie, just enjoy it, enjoy your darts, and just take this opportunity to say thank you for everything that you do for me, Charlie.
Definitely. Well, Glenn, it's always a pleasure to get you on the show. Really appreciate you taking out some time to have a chat with us, and wish you all the best with the restart of the Premier League next week.
Thank you. Lovely talking to you, Alex.
Big thanks to Glenn for joining us. Now let's get into some more Premier League chat and our two questions of the week. The first one coming up, will Glen Durrant still be top of the Premier League at the end of next week?
I mean, it's tough to say for two reasons. The main one being we don't yet know what the fixtures will be like for nights 10, 11, and 12. While we have a good idea who the players will be, there's still the chance that Gurney will catch someone and survive to the second stage. It's unlikely, but it doesn't tell us the order of the matches, and that will have a big impact. if Glen Durrant has Michael Van Gerwen, Nathan Aspinall, and Peter Wright, for instance, as those 3 second stage matches, that really decreases his chances of being top more than if those matches are some of the players who might be struggling more in the Premier League. At the same point, it gives him that chance against Michael Van Gerwen. If he can get a win over him, that is a 4-point shift. I don't think he will be, though. I think it's been a very good start to the Premier League campaign for him. He has a very good chance to get to the O2. But Van Gerwen, especially playing 6 consecutive nights, will get his mojo back and will get going. We saw what he was able to do during the summer series when he started to play on consecutive days and get a couple titles. Having that momentum, having that match sharpness will do him a world of good and will get him back towards his best. And I think we have to expect that he'll at the very least match what he did over the first 6 nights of getting 8 points, and if not do better and get 9 or so. And I think that will put him top. If he matches, he'll probably be top. If he does better, he will be top. I think he'll at least match. So I'm going to say no, Glen Durrant will not be first.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards that as well. And looking at the poll on Twitter, you guys, of course, can vote on it. We leave it open for the whole of the week. At the moment, 45% of you saying yes, Glenn will be top at the end of next week, and 55%, the slight majority, going with no on this occasion. And yeah, you raised some good points there. We've got 6 games next week, 6 nights. All the players going to be playing 6 games as long as they avoid that elimination spot. And yeah, we just don't know what half of those fixtures are going to be. But looking at the fixtures that we do know, it's a very tough 3 games that Glen Durrant's got coming back. I mean, to play Peter Wright in your first game and then go up against Michael Van Gerwen the following day, the top 2 players in the world, even though we don't know those fixtures for the 3 other days, that could tell us a lot about what we're going to see that week. Because yes, as we know, that the Premier League is usually a Thursday, and then the players go off and play some other events over the weekend. But this is solely going to be focusing on this one tournament, this one league phase for the best part of a week. And if Glenn could pick up some points in those first couple of nights, get a good result against Peter Wright, get a good result against Michael Van Gerwen, the confidence is going to be massive going into those next 4 nights, regardless of who he plays for those other 3 days. And yeah, his third game is against Rob Cross, one of those players that is lower down the table, but he's still a world-class player. All these players are. But just given how tight the table is at the moment, and given those first couple of games that Glenn's got, I'm just going to lean towards him not being top. But I do still think he'll be in the top 4, and I think he's got a very good chance of finishing in that top 4, getting in the playoffs. And okay, there is that bonus for finishing top of the table, but at the end of the day, it is all about getting into that top 4 and making sure that you are there for the playoffs, wherever it may be. It might be in a couple of weeks' time. It might be in 2 months' time. We don't know yet for sure. But yeah, back to the question. I'm just going to side with the majority here. I'm going to go no.
Now we'll have our second question of the week, which you can also vote on our Twitter. Which player will be eliminated from the Premier League next week? The options for those of you voting: Daryl Gurney, Rob Cross, Gordon Price, or even other. Everyone else is, of course, 4 points clear. Gurney on 2, Cross on 5, Price on 5. Who do you think?
Yeah, and this vote is a little bit more one-sided than the other one we've got at the moment. Daryl Gurney, who is bottom of the table at the moment, heading into next week, 66% of you going with him to be the player that's going to be eliminated after Judgment Night on Thursday next week, I believe. Next up, you've got Rob Cross, who is second from bottom, 19% of you going with him. Going Price, 10%, and then other, 5%. And you've got those 3 players on 7 points who mathematically Daryl Gurney can catch, but I think you've got to say that the top 5 are safe. Gary Anderson on 6 points, he's 4 points clear. He's a very good chance that he's going to be safe, I think. And then I think it does come down to those 3 players, Going Price, Rob Cross, both on 5 points, Daryl Gurney on 2 points. And you were first to beat me to it this week, mentioned about the goal differential in the first answer, but the goal differential on this is pretty massive going into next week. You've got Going Price on 0, Rob Cross on -2, and then Daryl -12. So it is close to being effectively another point. And like I said about the last answer, Glen Durrant, it could come down to those first couple of games and how the week plays out. That could be the case for this, because Daryl Gurney has got Chris Dobie, the contender, in his first game, and I think that's got to be one that Daryl Gurney's got to go into and say, right, if I'm going to stay in this Premier League, I've got to put the 2 points on the board. And as we know, this is being played behind closed doors in Milton Keynes. It's good that the challengers have got that chance to play in the Premier League, but it is going to be completely different to last year. Of course, Chris had that magnificent reception in Newcastle. Not going to get that this time round, and without that partisan crowd, if you like, that's going to play in Daryl Gurney's favour, if anything, because he's not going to get the boos on him or everyone being behind Chris. So I think if he can get something out of that first game, Rob, of course, is playing Michael Van Gerwen, who he's got an awful record against on TV over the last couple of years. It could start to swing if you get to the end of that first day. Daryl's picked up 2 points, Rob's had a heavy defeat, then I think you're probably doing this poll again, and it is going to be closer to that 50-50 between those two players. So I'm gonna back Daryl. I know he's had a tough Premier League. He's not won a game yet, but a lot of his games, aside from one, have all gone to those 12 legs. So if he can just nick those last couple of legs, if it gets tight, I'm going to back Daryl to miss out, and I'm going to go with Rob to be the one to be eliminated on Judgment Night.
Going against what most of the listeners have said, but I think I'm going to go with the majority here. Now, the one thing working against Rob Cross, you mentioned he's playing Michael Van Gerwen on the first night while Daryl Gurney gets one of the challengers, and it doesn't get much easier after that for Rob Cross, as his last two matches are also against people who are currently in the top four, going against Michael Smith on night 8 and then going against the Premier League leader Glen Durrant on night 9. So it is a very difficult run-in for Rob Cross. Well, Daryl Gurney, not that there's any easy matches in the Premier League, but he follows off that match with Chris Dobie against Nathan Aspinall and Peter Wright, the world champion. So definitely the easier run-in, relatively speaking, on paper. But he does need to get 3 points from those matches and just have a chance. And very likely 4. Now, if he does get 3 points, that might just make up the goal differential. He's currently 10 behind. But if Rob Cross suffers a heavy defeat, which he very well could in those 3, the goal differential will start to narrow, or at least the differential. But it is a big ask. And Rob Cross, yes, those are 3 tough matches, but he's a former world champion. He won 2 majors a year ago. He won the match play, he won the European Championship, and it's not like his performances have been poor in the Premier League. Gerwyn Price, we didn't even mention, has a slightly easier run and also has a challenger left. But you've got to think they're going to get points. And it's going to be very difficult for Daryl Gurney to win all 3 of those. And I just don't fancy him to win all 3 of them. Gary Anderson might be an interesting choice as well, because he's been inconsistent, but he did show some good stuff at the back end of the summer when it returned in the summer series and then the match play. And it might just be enough to say that he's now getting back to his best, and probably 1 point will be enough for him to be sure that he's going to be safe. So yeah, it's tough, but I think I'm going to say Daryl Gurney's just not going to get enough done over the 3 nights. And I think Rob Cross will surprise us and win one of those matches, if not 2, which could keep his playoff hopes alive as well.
Now we move on to our second guest on this week's show, and it is with the Master of Ceremonies of the PDC, John McDonald.
I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the PDC's Master of Ceremonies, John McDonald. Thanks for the time, John. How are you doing?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, remarkably well under the circumstances.
We'll come on to some of that in a moment, but firstly, you've been the PDC's main MC for more than a decade now. But what did you do before becoming an MC, and what was it that interested you in moving into the world of sports announcing?
Yeah, it's a strange transition, really, because I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd ever be performing in front of the camera. When I left the military in 1981, I'd had a bad accident and spent a couple of years in rehabilitation. During that period, I did a photography course, and I ended up a freelance photographer, and I became quite successful. Worked for the BBC for about 14 years, and then in 1994, I had a sudden urge that I thought I could be an announcer, because I'd been to an athletics meeting in the morning and a boxing in the evening, and both announcers were crap, and I thought, God almighty, how difficult would it be? I was always sort of laughing and joking in the background, I was always sort of hanging around with other photographers and doing impressions of people, and one of the guys just said, why don't you do it? And I thought, I'll find out. So I went to the Boxing Board of Control, got my licence, because you have to audition and get a licence, so you did then. Not too sure what you do now. And away I went. And that was it, really. I sort of set myself on the road to becoming a sports announcer.
Can you remember the first events that you did announce? What were the nerves like? What was it like?
Yeah, well, I was really nervous, actually, because I really didn't know what to expect. I'd never done it before. I'd literally auditioned 2 weeks before, and then I found myself in deepest, darkest Wales of all places, right in the middle of the valleys, in a very small boxing card. One of my friends had 2 or 3 boxers, and he said, look, there's this show in Eberval, right in one of the valleys in South Wales, and there's a little show there, would you like to go and do it? And I went along and did it, and I didn't know that somebody in the audience was one of the ITV directors, and he was making a documentary on a boxer, or thinking about making one. And he saw me, and he told Reg Guthridge and a guy called John Watt, who's a director of ITV, that there's this fella. And he gave my name, and Reg said, I think he's a photographer, that guy. Because by then I'd worked for Boxing News, Ring magazine, you name it, I'd done it. It's pretty well known, sort of both sides of the Atlantic as a photographer. I travelled to watch British boxers and cover British boxers abroad and stuff, so I was quite lucky. And I got a phone call from one of the guys at ITV, and he said, look, we've got this world title fight we're doing the world feed for in 1994. Would you like to do it? And I was like, sure. And that was it. I was off. And then, I'd appeared on television, and the rest is kind of history, I suppose.
And something I wanted to touch on with you as well is that you're well involved with Support Our Paras and raising money for the Parachute Regiment charity.
That's what the regiment I served with. As a kid, I was sort of a bit of a dead-end kid, really, and didn't know where I was going. Unfortunately, I was born on the 7th of August, which meant I was the youngest kid in the class. Everyone was always, 10 when I was still 9, and so at the time you could join the army at 16, and I went along with all the guys that were in my classes, and we went along, and of course I wasn't 16, and they said, well, we'll still take you because you'll be 16 soon. And so I joined as a junior, and had a great 18 months there before I could attend training, and it was fantastic. And I passed all my selection, and I went into the 1st Battalion and was having the time of my life. I'd got in the boxing team, I was in the football team, I did every sport you could imagine. I was a good cross-country runner. And then I had a near-fatal parachute accident, which put me in hospital for 2 years. So I had to reevaluate what I was going to do in life, and that's when I took the role as a photojournalist, really, because I was so interested in sport and loved it, and would have loved to have pursued a career in sport. I thought this might be the safest way for me. I was quite delicate at the time, and took ages to rehabilitate properly. It's not easy when you've broken your neck to get back to normal pace. So that's what I did. And I suppose it was good training to be an announcer, really, to understand how everything worked. For those that come into it as an announcer because they've been on local radio or they've done this kind of thing in the past, you never quite understand how the TV works, where to be, where to stand, how to stand even. You need to keep still, and it's not about you. I think a lot of announcers nowadays have sort of got the idea that they're the star of the show. You're by far not. In fact, you're just an irrelevant part of the business. The stars of the show are the players. And I think the more the modern day announcer understands that, the better, really.
Let's get on to your work then with the darts, and I believe your first darts MC gig on TV was the showdown between Phil Taylor and Andy Fordham in 2004. How did that all come about?
Yeah, that was an interesting one for me, because what happened in 1996, Barry Hearn had a big title fight with Joe Kawasaki, and my name popped up and said, by then I'd been going about 18 months, and Barry knew I'd been going about 18 months because I'd taken photographs of Barry in the past, and he was probably the most helpful promoter I've ever worked for. Whenever I covered a boxing show of his, or wherever I went to a snooker event for the BBC who I worked for, he was always really accommodating and really kind. And I mentioned, listen, Barry, I'm going to be doing the boxing. Yeah, I've seen you, don't worry, keep going, but I'm very loyal to my staff. I have a guy, and I said, oh, okay. And then suddenly I got this job, and I had a couple of weeks' notice. I thought, right, well, here's my chance to make a big impression. And pretty much on the night, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, but we all worked together as a team, and I hadn't worked with any of Barry's staff at that point. And we all sort of got stuck in, and it all worked perfectly. And on the Monday, they had a sort of debriefing as to why some things were going wrong or did on the time, which actually none of it was their fault. It's, it's the normal stuff. You employ outside contractors, security, didn't bring barriers on this occasion, and the paramedics, I think, went to Brentford instead of Brentwood. It was all of that, everything that could have gone wrong. And we just held it together and we just did did a great job, and he asked everybody in the office what they thought of me, and they was all like, "Right, he's really good." So I said, "Well, we've just got the rights to the World Pool Championship, and I think I'll use him on the Moscone Cup, and I think I'll use him on the snooker." And the next thing I knew, I was up and away, and I went from sort of doing sort of 3 jobs a month to doing sort of 1 a week, and then it became a different business. And I learned a lot from them. They were very good to me. There was one director who passed away a couple of years ago, very young, very premature, a very premature death, very, very sad, a guy called Martin Marks, and he actually moulded me. He was really helpful because we have talk back in our ear, and he would, say, move to your left, move to your right, can you make this a bit longer, make this a bit shorter. And I learned a lot about live television. And I'd only ever really worked on live television, so I was set for a darts event. Barry had this idea that both Phil was with the PDC, and at the time Andy Fordham was the BDO World Champion, and neither organisation could really get involved because, there was that at the time, there was all that sort of animosity. There certainly wasn't any from the PDC, but I believe the BDO were very unhelpful. And we put the show on, and it was a total nightmare, really. Andy, unfortunately, was taken very ill. In fact, led to the fact that he nearly passed away. He was very, very ill. But we did a great job of what we had. And Barry had then seen me in action on the darts. And I didn't know anything about darts. I'd never been to a dart match. I didn't even know how it worked. I'd never covered darts as a photographer. I'd never been involved in any way. I wasn't really a guy who went to the pub or anything, so I didn't really know the sort of setup. And I was sort of guided through by a number of backroom staff, and that was the job done. And everybody seemed to think I did a good job of it, especially the players. So that was quite nice. And then I was away working in China for Barry, who was on a big job in Taipei, of all places. And I got a call, and he said, "Look, I need you to, when you get back on the Saturday morning, you land in London, I need you to come straight to Blackpool for the 2005 World Match Play." And I went there, and I had probably one of the best weeks' work I've ever done in my life. I was made so welcome by all the players. Not dissimilar to the world of boxing, really, darts. And I know that might sound strange to some people, and I've said it publicly before. You'll be surprised. And it's quite a lonely existence being a dart player. It's just you and the other dart player and the referee, so it's no different to the boxing. You have to put a lot of hours in trainings, a lot of travelling, a lot of time on your own. And of course, nothing prepares a dart player for these big stages. I mean, how could it be? You could be playing in your local pub on Super League or for your county, maybe, with maybe 30 or 40 family and friends watching you. You qualify for the UK Open, and you go to Minehead, and you've got maybe 4,000 live crowd. I feel for them. It's a big step, and they're very brave, and so I always have a bit of a soft spot for all the players. And then I ended up doing that, and the Premier League was formed. Barry wanted me to do that, and then the original announcer at the PDC had retired, and Barry said, "Look, how do you fancy stepping in and doing all the live TV stuff with the darts?" I mean, it meant that I missed loads of work that I had with other organisations, lots of things I could no longer do. But, as Barry said, you can't be on EastEnders and Coronation Street. You have to make your mind up what you're going to do in life. And I think I made the right choice.
Definitely, and you've seen close hand over the years the growth of the PDC with the bigger venues, the bigger crowds, and
incredible.
In particular the World Championship, moving from the Circus Tavern to Alexandra Palace. You've been the MC.
Exactly. I mean, we are. What's remarkable about the PDC, which people may not realise, is that it's not this great, big, massive corporate company with hundreds of staff and think tanks. It's a group of absolutely tied up, ready to go, biting, chomping at the bit, really good young people, and they know what the public want, and they work very, very hard, and they're rewarded. Of course they are. It's a great company to work for, but they work really hard. Got a great leader, been in sport his entire career, might only be young, our chief executive, Matt Porter, but he knows exactly what makes it all work. And yeah, it has been. People say the World Championship for me is like the pinnacle. I look at all the other stuff. I look at the tough gigs that we've done around the world promoting darts, and I think that's where the credit should be due. The World Championship, dare I say, runs itself. The other events where you're breaking new territory. I mean, having the balls that want to go to Madison Square Garden. We've been in Vegas. I've been on the stage in Vegas. I mean, look, no one headlines in Vegas and has their big pictures on the billboard unless you're something very, very special. And, I think credit to them for that.
Away from the World Championship, the Premier League is another big event that's really taken off. Big crowds week in, week out, not at the moment, but they've ventured out to Rotterdam, Berlin recent years. Where would you like to see the Premier League go next, apart from Milton Keynes?
Well, I mean, first of all, we've got this awful situation on our hands at the moment that everybody's going through, and I think to even have got the darts back like we did and played the match play, be it was behind closed doors, it gives the general public at home that have become big fans of darts. I mean, this sport has grown beyond anybody's expectation. I mean, there'd be the few people that said, I always knew it would be good. I didn't think it would ever be this big, and I'm being absolutely brutally honest. It was always... But what I quite liked about it, and I asked people, if me and you had nothing to do with darts and we was in a pub watching it on the telly, we would all want to go. It's one of those things. It's a massive bucket list tick. And yet some people come, have such a great time, they end up meeting up at these events. So, you've got groups of people that say, well, I'll see you in Blackpool in July, and they have a table. And when I walk around the arena, I've become friends. I've seen them so many times now. And they go, oh, this is a new friend. He's just joined him and his wife. And, how you doing? Enjoying yourself? And I'm really looking forward to it. Never been before, but they tell me it's great. And you think this is terrific when it sells itself, Our own customers are selling the product. And then you go to places like Rotterdam, and on the way there, we left very early the first time, and there was just this sea of orange. People in orange suits, orange coats, jumpers, hats, shoes, and you're thinking, wow. Then we got there, and of course we saw the arena packed, and you think, how can it be? How much so we did 2 days on the spin. I mean, what event could do that?
Your diary's a busy one with the PDC and other work that you've got on as well, but we've obviously had a long break due to the virus from March to July before things started to get back up again. But how was that break for you?
I said to my wife, since I've stopped working on the boxing and the snooker, it's meant that I've had a bit more time at home, but still not enough time at home. And my wife retired from work 5 years ago on the pretense that we would both spend a bit more time with each other. And on the 9th of March, I actually said this to myself: it would be great to have some time at home. I didn't realise on the 14th of March I'd spend the next 4 months at home. I don't think anybody could foresee that. It's been the strangest time. Yeah, I've missed a lot of things. Of course, I've missed going to work, missed my colleagues, I've missed putting on the shows. That would be, an absolute positive, really. Of course I miss that, but having time at home taught me that I'm not ready for retirement yet, that's for sure. And it's made me really appreciate what we do. We do something very special. We are very, very lucky. And sometimes you can sit there and take it all in and think, oh, it's the same old story, every week we do this. But you're actually performing in front of a live audience that can't wait to see you, and you must never lose track of that. You owe them that. Every night I perform, remember that there'll be somebody there for the first time. He deserves to get a great night out where he goes home and says to his folks, family, friends, what a terrific time we had.
Definitely, and you touched on earlier about darts being back on TV last month with the World Match Play obviously behind closed doors, and we've had a few players on the show over the last few weeks, Russ Bray, the referee as well, talking about their experience of it. But when you got the call that the World Match Play was going to go on away from Blackpool, no crowd, what was your immediate reaction?
Well, I just thought, logistically, what an incredible task they've done. I mean, just thinking about it, nobody else is working, nobody else is thinking about going to work, and suddenly, our team go, right, come on, we can do this. Now, luckily, Barry had put on the Champions of Champions snooker at the same event 2 weeks before, so for us it was great to go and watch a bit of that, make sure, we saw how it all worked, how the social distancing worked, how wearing a mask worked, how, the different things they did. They couldn't have done it any better if they tried. I mean, it was beyond my thought pattern. When I turned up, I had a particular time to go and get my test. I went, had my test, very, very simple, went to my room, food was brought to the room, breakfast was brought to the room, everything was laid on. Then we got a phone call, all negative, and we went to work, and it was all in the same building. Everything was clearly marked. It was very clinical, well performed, and really impressed. I mean, I've done a lot of things in my life, but I don't get impressed by many things nowadays. But I got very impressed by the standard in fact, the way it worked. Really, I thought the way it just. I hated to have had to have planned something like that. To think of every single eventuality, putting the practice balls in a certain place, separated out, and trying to entertain our sponsors still, and our TV, our foreign TV that had to come, making sure they adopted the same protocol. It was a big exercise in trying to get everything right, and they smashed it out of the ballpark.
Yeah, got to agree with you on that. And for you personally, as the MC for the event, was it strange at first giving the players that big introduction, but without the crowd being there?
I've done a job in a studio once, a boxing event with nobody there, and it's weird. And then, of course, we had that terrible Beast of the East come and snow us in Minehead. We had to do the championship there behind closed doors, and that again was very odd. But I thought the players were great. Never got any sort of, it didn't affect them in any way. In fact, some of them it helped, because some players, as you know, play very well on the floor, but don't do so well in live tournaments. Now, again, I'll go back to when we spoke just now. It's a very different environment. When people look at these players, these are just ordinary people off the street. They've been playing darts, they're very good at it, they suddenly find themselves on the tour, and we take them to a Premier League where there's 12,000 people screaming and shouting. That's a different environment for a lot of people, and that's a lot to take in. And like people, new players like the Rob Crosses, they still haven't quite got the hang of how to deal with the crowd. It still, makes them very nervous. And I've got such admiration for them. They just handled it so well. It was brilliant. They were great, as were all our staff. And our broadcaster, Sky, because they decided not to test. They decided to go for social distancing and masks, so we had two separate areas to operate in, and it worked perfectly. And that just shows what a great working relationship the PDC has with its broadcast outlets and its sponsors, that we still get the trust that we can perform and put on a great show.
Now, in recent years, we've seen two of the sports greats, Phil Taylor, Raymond van Barneveld, retire from the circuit, two big walk-ons. But two parts to this question, really. Who have been your favourite players to introduce, and what's your favourite walk-on currently from the current crop of players?
Well, that's an interesting one, because obviously Phil was very special. I mean, when you talk about Phil Taylor, you're talking about the greatest player that ever played the game. That would be like introducing Pelé in football. I mean, this guy is something else than like introducing Muhammad Ali in boxing. This guy was and still is the man. And so he needed something special. I worked very hard on getting that script together. And, he was a record-breaking, history-making, and I did give it my all every opportunity I got, because I knew time was running out, and I knew the punters loved it. I watch people. I'm not stupid. I look at the corner of my eye, I can see people so excited, and it's great. But we've still got a lot of great young players coming through, and that's this game has a never-ending supply of great talent. Look at Michael Van Gerwen. I mean, his intro, for instance, you go anywhere north of the border with Gary Anderson, we can prepare to take some headphones. I mean, they go nuts. There are some great walk-ons, of course there is, and there'll be some good ones coming up, I'm sure. We all think that it's going to end when the golden goose leaves, but it just starts all over again. We just have to reinvent and help the younger players think of good nicknames, get them involved a bit, give them media training, which we've started working on now, which is great. They get lots of different interviews now. There's a lot of social media around our organisation, so we're always fulfilling. The tiniest little social media outlet gets the same as any broadcaster would, so we make everybody very welcome. They get a lot of exposure in different ways.
And lastly, we know from your video during the World Series last year with Michael Van Gerwen and the dartboard, you enjoy a practical joke. Are there any you can tell us about that have been your funniest from memory?
That was. I didn't even know Michael was in the queue. I went to buy a friend of mine, Bruce McTavish, probably the greatest boxing referee in the world, lives in the Philippines. I was visiting the Philippines on my way home, and I bought him he's originally from New Zealand. He wasn't all black when he was 15 years old. A great friend of mine. I went to buy him a hat. a cap, an All Blacks cap, and I was in the queue and I saw Michael in front of me, and I just walked past the dartboard that had his picture on it. I thought, how funny would it be? So I whispered in his ear, and then I started filming, and he said to the girl, do you have any dartboards? And she said, yeah, sure. And he says, okay, could you show me? And she said, well, I'm serving. And he said, well, I'd really like you. So she said, okay. And she sort of got somebody to take over, and we followed her. And she's walking along, and I'd had a conversation with her the day before. And she told me that she played netball, and it was a good runner and stuff. And we were chatting away. Everybody in New Zealand does a sport of some sort. They're very, very sporty. She's very, very pretty, very fit, lovely girl to talk to. Knew everything about what we were doing there in Hamilton, knew we was over for the darts and everything. So I wasn't really that much of a stranger to her, but Michael, of course. And then he goes, look, I particularly want a dartboard and darts, And she goes, oh, yeah, well, we got this one. And as she looks at the board, and she looks back at Michael and I'm filming, she's sort of in embarrassment, really, that she didn't recognise him. It was more her embarrassment. And we both started laughing, and we got a couple of tickets, and we took them to her and said, look, we gave them to because she wasn't in the shop when we went back. And we said, look, thanks for that. It was really good fun. And I said to Michael, come on, we'll tweet it out and see what happens. And I got a call from Fox, could we use it? I said, sure. A call from Sky, can we use it? Sure. And a call from someone else and someone else. And I'm like, yeah, knock yourself out, And I was told somebody did a calculation that 19.5 million people watched it, Well, it wasn't really intended to be anything other than just a bit of fun. But that's, we do loads of that. You've seen our Christmas ad, and we're always sort of trying to think of things that can entertain people, make them laugh a bit, because it's all too serious life, isn't it? We've got to have fun. And we've got some great, the guys that work with us and Dave Allen's team in the press room, they really, really understand how it all works, and we have some great fun. I mean, last year's Christmas video was just too funny. It was impossible to do, but too funny.
Well, John, really appreciate you taking out so much of your time to have a chat with us, and wish you all the best with the restart of the Premier League next week.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, I hope to see you on the road. Take care, everyone.
Thanks again to John for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with a few more things to talk about. We'll also get into a listener question and also have our picks for the first night of the Premier League restart next Tuesday. But one thing we've got to talk about on the show this week, and it is something that we don't like to talk about, but it has been in the news this week today, of course, on Tuesday when we're recording, is the Darts Regulation Authority. They've come out with a statement this morning with regards to Wessel Nyman and Carl McKinstry. Both have a case to answer for match fixing in the MODUS online leagues, which we've seen take place over the last few months. Both have been suspended from the DRA sanctioned events until the conclusion of the hearings. Wessel, we've seen come out with a statement admitting to these allegations. Carl, we've not seen say anything in himself personally yet, but what's your take on it when you saw it?
I mean, I'm not going to speak as to the Carl McKinstry one yet because he hasn't admitted, at least publicly hasn't admitted that he match fixed, and it's an ongoing investigation, and we need to see the results of it. But Wessel Nyman came clean after the news broke, and that's serious. Even though this wasn't a PDC competition, even though this wasn't even an official competition, it was just one sanctioned online. MODUS did not just put this on as a fun little event. MODUS worked with bookmakers to get this streamed, to get people to bet, to get interest in this, and therefore this was, in that regard, the same as any PDC match, and there needs to be trust that the player is going to play to the best, and trust that the players are going to play to win. And the fact that at the very least one, if not more, competitors didn't, is a huge credibility hit to darts. And that there's nothing more that you can really say than that. It's not acceptable under any circumstances. And it's going to be interesting to see what the punishment eventually is. I think part of it comes down to how much Nyman cooperates, also the extent of his, cheating. But he should be suspended. He should be suspended for a while, because if you let this slide, it doesn't matter that it wasn't under the PDC banner. It looks bad letting this slide even a little. He needs to be punished the same as if he did this in an a Pro Tour event. And I think that is a very, very lengthy suspension.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I won't go into to Carl's case, obviously, because that's something that's still ongoing. We're not quite sure what's happened there, and say innocent until proven guilty and all that. So we won't go into his case. So we can only really talk about Wessel Nyman. And yeah, when we saw the news come out earlier today, it's a massive shame, because I was looking into his Wikipedia page today and saw he was born in 2000. Made me feel a little bit old myself. But yeah, he's only 20 years old. We've seen little bits and pieces of him over the last couple of years. Of course, he's played a few times on the European Tour. He's won a couple of development tour events as well. And just with the development tour, we've only seen not that many events so far this year, but he was second on that order of merits. He had a fairly decent chance when we've got the restart coming up of the development tour. If he'd have had a good weekend there, that could have got him a tour card onto the PDC main circuit. Could have possibly got him a shot at the World Championship at the end of the year as well. So there was a lot to play for Wessel this year, and you've got to think, as you say, he's admitted to it. He's come out clean. There's going to be some sort of suspension, some sort of ban from playing in PDPA associated events or DRA associated events, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it is a massive shame. And when we were doing this show earlier on in the year, talking about online darts, the online darts community, of course, we've run our own league amongst the lesser quality players, if you like. But online darts, when it took off, when there was no PDC events going on at all, it did fill the gap for a lot of darts fans being able to watch darts on their screens via the online streams that MODUS was putting on. And they were one of the flag bearers. They kept it going for a very long time. I think they've only just stopped in the last week or so. And you had thousands of people watching it. Of course, you had the people betting on it as well. And for this to happen, it is a massive shame. And I don't want to say it's a positive, but if there was one positive you can take from this, which is an awful situation for us to see and for darts to see, it is that Wessel has owned up to it very quickly. He's put out that statement shortly after the DRA put something out admitting to it. He's very apologetic in it, and he's also put in there about how he wants to rebuild his career, and he also wants to help educate other players about, if they get into similar situations like this, educating them on how they can perhaps avoid it in the future. So if there was one slight silver lining in it, it is that he is gonna take his punishment and he is gonna learn from it. But it's a big damage to his reputation, and one of the top young players coming through the game. It's going to be hard for him to come through that. It's going to be hard for darts as well over these next few weeks and months, if there is some more online darts and people are going to be watching it, and they are going to be wary about, are these players playing to the best of their ability. So it is a big shame for the sport, a sad day for darts, but we'll see what the punishment is going to be for Wessel and what the case is going to be with Kyle. And I'm sure this won't be the last that we talk about this.
No, definitely not. Now, other news that came out today, at least today as of when we're recording, because we're recording on Tuesday, the PDC have finally announced the official criteria to qualify for the Grand Slam of Darts. And the BDO has gone down from the 8 spots they've had for the last, 5 years now, to just 2 spots. The men's world champion and the ladies world champion, Wayne Warren and Makura Suzuki, respectively, invited, but that is it. 22 spots to players in the PDC organization that make TV finals or win Pro Tour events. Similar criteria to last year, but 22 instead of 16, and then the 8 tour card qualifiers. What was your reaction to the announcement?
I found it a bit of a joke, if I'm being honest. And when we've just spoken about a serious topic like we have with the DRA and match fixing, it's probably shouldn't be having too much of a moan about it. And we have given the PDC a lot of praise over the last few months, how they've been able to come back and put on the summer series, put on the World Match Play, and it was a great success. But for me, I was thoroughly disappointed, thoroughly let down by this announcement, because in terms of the BDO, and I know that we've spoken a lot about the BDO this year and last year and their demise, and say we're probably not going to see another World Masters or a World Championship run by them. Still up in the air whether they carry on running the county scene at all. But for me, I do feel a little bit bad for some of these players, because and the man in particular is John O'Shea, because last year he won the World Masters. I know it was a couple of weeks before the Grand Slam, but the picks by the BDO and the PDC had already been made before the start of the tournament, so it didn't matter who won that tournament. They weren't going to be in the Grand Slam last year. But I just felt it would have been the right thing to do to get John O'Shea in this tournament, because whatever you think of the BDO in this current situation, that tournament did go ahead. The World Masters, the longest running major darts tournament we have in the whole of world darts, and okay, we're not going to see it this year, so that's going to end that thing that it had. But it did go on last year. We did see a new man win the title, John O'Shea, fair and square. Came through those early rounds that took place on the floor, and then he came through that weekend at the Circus Tavern, beat a top quality player in Scott Waits, a two-time world champion, in the final to win that title. I just felt like he deserved a spot in there. And okay, it's good, yeah, the BDO have got some sort of representation with the two world champions, and on the other side of things, I'm delighted that Wayne Warren is going to get another shot at it, because last year he had the injuries when he turned up to the Grand Slam, played in it, didn't do himself that much justice, but I'm really pleased for him given the year that he's had as a world champion, with the prize fund reduction, missing out on lots of events, lots of exhibitions, that he's going to get a shot at the Grand Slam. And of course Mikuru Suzuki as well, pleased for her. But for me, I just feel like there could have been a little bit more thought into this. 8 spots, yeah, you probably could have squeezed 8 spots if you really wanted to from the BDO, if you were going down the World Championship runner-up semi-finalist route for both the men's and the ladies. But I just felt, giving that space to John O'Shea, I just felt like he deserved it as a BDO major winner, and probably the last ever BDO World Master.
Yeah, I think there's a case to be made that John O'Shea should have been selected, and maybe the men's world championship runner-up as well, Jim Williams, to give the BDO 4 spots. But I do think that in the long run, this is what we were moving towards, the BDO having less and less representation, if it even exists. And this wasn't the right year to go ahead and make it a global tour, because, well, we haven't had a global event, like I said, I think last week, or maybe it was a few weeks ago, that it will eventually be, or that I think it should eventually be, because we haven't had the global tours. The Asian tour is just now getting back into action after having to postpone its first 6 months. Similar problems for most of the other PDC sanctioned or PD affiliated tours around the world. So you had to do something as a one-off this year, and expanding the amount of spots for PDC players, especially since they've lost out on the opportunity to play a lot of their events this year and therefore lost out on the money, I think is fair. I think keeping more of the money this year in the PDC makes sense, but I think cutting back from 8 to 4 BDO players might have been more fair, and bringing in Jim Williams and bringing in John O'Shea. If you didn't bring in John O'Shea, then maybe the ladies' world championship runner-up would have been a decent alternative as well. But I don't think in the end you can't complain too much, because this is a PDC event, and more than ever the PDC players need this opportunity, need this money, and making sure that 30 of the 32 spots go to PDC players this year, I think is a fair result, even if it might not be what, as a darts fan, we want to see.
I've got one listener question to bring you this week. It comes from Jenny Murtaugh, who says, who do you guys think is the right candidate to fill the very big shoes of the amazing Dave Clark?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and Dave Clark has done a phenomenal job over the past decade or so spearheading Sky's coverage of darts, as darts really has taken off into the mainstream more than ever before. And can't say that that's because of Dave Clark, but Dave Clark's presenting has helped put a face to at least the most important television partner of the PDC. I'm not sure who should take over the role. There's probably someone within Sky that they will promote or bring over. Of course, Dave Clark initially took over from Jeff Stelling when Jeff Stelling stepped away from the darts to focus fully on the football. And what a job Dave Clark did. I think it'll be something similar where they have someone from within Sky, not necessarily Nigel Pearson, who did it in a caretaker role in Blackpool and Milton Keynes, but someone who presenting as their normal gig for Sky, I think will end up doing it, but I don't know who that is.
Yeah, it's a really hard one, isn't it? Because we've spoke about Dave on here when the announcement came out from him that he was stepping down from his role as Sky, and he is going to be a hard act to follow. And I think of what Dave's done for the darts, and when you think of the darts on Sky, you do think, oh, that's a familiar voice that you're going to hear and see is going to be Dave Clark. And I know that in his early days in Sky, he did Sky Sports News, did a bit of the boxing. I think he did a few other sports as well, but in more recent years it was solely on darts, and ideally as a darts fan, if you like, I suppose you'd like to see someone that focuses more on the darts, because it is a busy schedule. But you're probably going to see someone from Sky maybe pushed up into that role. And I did a Q&A on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. Someone asked this question, and a couple of names that I brought up were David Croft and Rod Starden. I know that they do other sports, and of course with Rod, wishing him all the best as he recovers from his stroke. We're not quite sure what the time frame is for him coming back to do any commentary or presenting, but those are two names that have done it before in the past. I think they've done a very good job. Whether they'd be interested in taking on that role from Dave as a full-time thing, there's a lot of commitments that go into that. Who knows? But next week I know we've got Andy Goldstein. He's going to be presenting the Premier League. I think he's done the Premier League a few times in the past. I think he might have done the Grand Slam a few times as well. So he's someone that darts fans that watch Sky will be familiar with, and I think I've seen him do a few bits on the snooker on Eurosport. He's got a great rapport with Jimmy White and Ronnie O'Sullivan. I know he's very knowledgeable on that sport. Whether he's knowledgeable on the darts as much as well, we'll see next week. But we'll see how he gets on next week. Nigel Pearson, the name you mentioned, did the World Match Play, so Sky have definitely got plenty of options. An option that's not getting much recognition at the moment, if you like, and I'm not quite sure what the travel arrangements would be for yourself, Burton, to get over from America to the UK quite often. But myself and you as joint co-hosts, and getting that hang tight sign off on national television, I think would be a great moment for this podcast.
Yeah, I think though, if I was doing it each week, by the time I was halfway through my quarantine, it would already be Premier League, and I'd have to go home only to restart the quarantine all over again. But yeah, you mentioned Premier League, and it's where we started the show. It's where we're going to end the show, and it's weird doing this in August. Normally we do this in February, March, April, May, but let's make our picks for Night 7 of the Premier League from the Marshall Arena in Milton Keynes. First matchup, the Premier League leader Glen Durrant, a full point clear of number 2 right now, going against Peter Wright, who's out of the top 4 on goal differential, the world champion. Still, though, with every chance to make the O2. How do you see this one?
Yeah, I just want to say that the good thing about the Premier League being extended is, of course, that my reign as the Premier League Prediction League champion has gone on for a lot longer than I expected. And I've got to say as well to our listeners that get involved in our Premier League Prediction League on Twitter, we are going to be continuing that next week. And also got to say a big shout out, big thanks to Winmail, who originally were going to supply us with that prize to the winner, the signed set of Michael van Gogh darts. They have got in touch with them, and they are going to continue to supply us with that prize. So big thanks to them. We'll touch on that at the end of the show. But yeah, first game, I'm gonna go down on the middle on this one. I'm gonna go over a 6-all draw, as we touched on earlier on in the show. It's a big week for Glen Durrant. Is he going to finish the week top of the table? I've said that he's got to get some points to do that in these first couple of games against some big names. Got that win against Peter Wright in the World Match Play a month or so ago. Peter's going to be going into it wanting to get some revenge. Glenn, of course, as you'll have heard from him earlier on this show, he's looking to do a different setup. He's moving away from the pear-shaped flights. How's that going to go? Is it going to go pear-shaped? Who knows? But I'm going to go with a 6-all draw in the first game.
Well, compared to his results in the first half of the first third of the season or whatever it was, draw might be results going pear-shaped for him, because Glen Durrant was one of the, if not the standout person before the break in the Premier League. Peter Wright, little bit of inconsistency, but was starting to get his mojo with consecutive wins before the interruption. Of course, came back and played well in the summer series. But Glen Durrant played well in the World Match Play, and I think he's going to be buoyed from being atop of the Premier League. Not often you see Middlesbrough even in the Premier League, let alone top it in August. Of course, that could just be one game into the season. This is 6. I think he stays there at least for another night. I'm going 7-4 to the Premier League leader.
Second game on our list then for the first night of the restart, and it is the world number 1 Michael van Gogh against the former world champion, the Appreciation Minute. Rob Cross, how do you see this one going?
I kind of hinted at this earlier that I thought Rob Cross would get a scalp somewhere over those first 3 nights to assure himself survival. And I think this might be where it comes, but I'm not going to go for the full win. I think this is going to be a draw. I think for Cross, you mentioned his struggles since that World Championship semifinal against Van Gogh on TV. Obviously, he beat him in that semifinal, but since then has struggled. But this is when you'd want to play him. That first match before he really gets going over the week, because I think come night 9, night 10, Van Gerwen will be very difficult to beat. This is where you're going to want to get him, but I just don't think Rob Cross is playing at that level that it would take to beat him, even if Van Gerwen's a little rusty, even if Van Gerwen's had to go through some troubles to get into England. We're still not exactly sure how that's all going to work out with the quarantine rules changing from, well, hour to hour. But I think Rob Cross will get a point out of this match that might just be enough to see him safely into the second half of the season. So I'm going a draw.
Yeah, I'm not going to be as brave as you on this one. I'm going to go with Michael Van Gerwen to take it 7-3. And looking at the head-to-head, it is very one-sided. 18 wins for Michael Van Gerwen, 3 for Rob Cross. One of those, of course, was that World Championship semi-final, one of the best games of all time. Of course, one of the last ones that he had was on TV, the World Series, I think, in Brisbane. I think it was one of the finals. Did a real job on him. Since then, he's lost 5 times against Michael Van Gerwen in their 5 TV meetings, and the leg differential, if you like, 44-14 in favour of the world number one. So it's quite one-sided in that respect as well. And I've just got to go with Michael as well. I think he's going to hit the ground running with a win. I'm going to 7-3 to Michael Van Gerwen.
Third match, another Michael up. This one, Michael Smith, who's currently third in the table, ahead of Nathan Aspinall and Peter Wright on goal differential. He's going, though, against Gary Anderson, fresh off of a run to the final in the World Match Play. Currently 6, just a point out of the top 4. How do you see this one?
I think out of the 5 games, this is one of the most difficult ones to call, really. And you mentioned that the World Match Play run to the final of Gary Anderson. Of course, these two met in that epic semi-final, 18-16 to Gary Anderson in the end. That'll probably be one of the games that Michael Smith will look back on in years to come and think, how did I not get over the line in that one? So I think he'll be going into this looking to get a little bit of revenge on Gary. And even though he got to the final, we spoke about it on this show, in our review show, the World Match Play. Gary, of course, said himself he wasn't very happy with how he played during the week, wasn't happy with how his darts were going. And okay, we've had a little bit of a break since the World Match Play. It'll have been the best part of a month when these players take to the stage next Tuesday since that World Match Play final. What work has Gary Anderson put in over the last 4 or 5 weeks to get himself ready for this? I'm just going to give the edge to Michael Smith. I'm going to go 7-4 to the Bully Boy.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. And if you can think of that epic semifinal as, well, 4 different matches in one. You had the initial phase where Michael Smith just, neither of them really played anywhere near their best, but Michael Smith just was poor, and Gary Anderson opened a 5-leg lead. Then you have that middle phase where Gary Anderson, where Michael Smith raised his game, got back into it. Then you had it where Gary Anderson re-raised his game. Not that Michael Smith dropped off at all, but Gary Anderson threw some of his best legs of the tournament and got back up by 5. And then you had the last phase where they were both playing really well. Mike Smith again came back, but Gary Anderson was able to just get over the line. It was 4 matches for the price of 1. I don't think this one will be 4 for the price of 1. First of all, it's not a race to 17. It's a race to 6 or 7. And second of all, I think Michael Smith is actually going to have more confidence coming out of the World Match Play than Gary Anderson, because he knows that it was a slow start. Like, he's done him in before, but it was a slow start that did him in there, and he showed a lot of nerve to get back into that match twice. I think he's going to come in confident. I think he's going to put in a display. I'm going Bully Boy to win this one. You said 7-4. I'm going 7-3. I wouldn't be surprised, depending on if he wins the bull, if it's even 7-2.
4th game up then to pick, and it is Nathan Aspinall against Gerwyn Price. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, very, very important match for Gerwyn Price, obviously, to assure himself survival, but more importantly, to keep himself in that race to either the O Tour finals night, wherever it's going to be. But for Nathan Aspinall, still currently 4th, possibly to keep pace with Peter Wright, but also keep pace with those ahead of him. I think, though, it's going to be the Welshman who gets the better of it. Gerwyn Price, a bit unfortunate over the first part of the season. 3 draws to start. Finally got a win, but followed that up with consecutive losses. He's been playing at a fairly good standard. Hasn't been getting the results, though. I think this will be the first of, well, probably many results over the next week for him in Milton Keynes, and a very big one at that. I'm going 7-3 to the Iceman.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a big game, and 2 players that had very disappointing World Match Plays. Okay, Nathan lost to the eventual winner, Dimitri van der Berg, but you could see on the stage he was not happy with how he was playing. Gerwyn Price as well, going out in the first round. He was one of the bigger seeds as well to fall at the first round. So both going back to the Marshall Arena in Milton Keynes next week with a point to prove. And both of them looking to do something that they've never done before, and that is get into that top four, qualify for the playoffs of the Premier League for the first time. And these two, I've said it often on this show before, they do provide a lot of great games. And okay, their head-to-head on first glance looks a little bit one-sided, 8-4 to go in price. But you take away those 3 games before they met at the World Championship a couple of years ago, it's 5-4 to go in price. So in recent times, it has been very close between the two of them. And for that reason, you mentioned about going price being the draw specialist. I'm going to go with a draw on this one. My second draw of the night, I'm going to go 6-all between these two.
Wonder if you'll make it 3 draws in the night. Last match, Joel Gurney, the handicapper's nightmare, hasn't had a win yet. The only player in the competition without a win, excluding the challengers. But he does have 2 draws going against Chris Dobie, who you mentioned at the start of the show, played last year as a challenger as well in Newcastle. How do you see this one?
Well, I'm not feeling quite that adventurous just yet. Got a little bit of hope that I might be able to retain my Premier League Prediction League title, and all the people that entered before the season got postponed, they'll forget to enter next week, and I'll be able to claw the gap a little bit. So I'm not going to go for 3 draws. I'm going to go for it to go 12 legs though, and as I mentioned earlier, all but one of Darrell Gurney's games have gone the distance in this Premier League so far. They've gone to the 12 legs. A lot of the times he's drawn or ended up losing, but I'm going to go for the other direction this time around. I'm going to go with Darrell to get the win. It's an important game for him. If he doesn't get 2 points in this game, I think it's going to be very difficult for him to avoid being eliminated on that judgment night a couple of days later. So I'm going to go for the handicapper's nightmare to get off to a winning start and close that gap on Rob Cross to 1 point. I'm going to go 7-5 to Darrell Gurney.
Yeah, I was thinking about saying the exact same thing. And Gurney really was struggling before the break. But if anyone benefited from the 4 months off, it was Darrell Gurney, because he just lifted his game almost across the table out of the break. Okay, he didn't win any of the summer series, but he had a quarterfinal, he had a semifinal, had I think 6 or 7 ton plus averages. He only had 2 on the year before that. And you go back early on in the year, he was struggling to even hit a 90 average. This was by far the best we've seen from him in quite some time. For Chris Dobie, it's been a bit of a struggle after his breakthrough year last year. And he might have more to play for in this to show that he deserves this invite. But he's not playing at the level he was a year ago. Gurney is playing at the level he was a year ago, if not better. First time we've been able to say that for a while. So I'll go, you said 7-5, I'll go 7-4 then to be different. But I think the handicapper's nightmare gets his first win of the season. Anything else for this week?
Just to say big thank you to our 2 guests on the show this week, Glen Durrant and John McDonald. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to our listeners as well. The last 4 or 5 weeks, we've not had any darts to talk about. This happened given that we've not had any events between the World Match Play and this Premier League restart coming up next week. But thanks very much for sticking with us and having a listen. Don't forget to get in your picks for the Premier League, our Prediction League. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be continuing that. The prize is a signed set of Michael Van Gogh in darts, courtesy of our friends at Windmail. So do get your picks in. Follow us on Twitter at Weekly Dartscast, and make sure you're on there for quite a bit of next week, I'm guessing, because we've got the 6 nights to pick from. Of course, I think me and you, Burton, will probably put our picks out each day. If you want to know what results to go for, just go with the opposite. Yeah, not quite sure if we'll be back next week. We might surprise you with something, but we might have a Darts Legends episode, maybe 1 or 2 next week. Got a couple guests lined up, so we might try and bring them out next week, so you've still got something to listen to. And I'm sure we'll be back in between the break between the 2 Premier League sessions that we've got coming up to look back on the first session and look ahead to the final bit of the league phase and possibly the finals night in Milton Keynes. Who knows?
Yes, and I realize I do have something else for this week. I forgot to play my Joker. I think you might have as well, but I did not play a Joker. I'm going to play my Joker, though, in the Nathan Aspinall-Guerin Price match. Did you play one?
No, that is a very good point as well. We should have touched on that. Anyone that wants to get involved, pick one of the games to Joker, and you'll double any of the points that you get for that. For me, I'm going to go with the Darrell Gurney Chris Dobie game. That's going to be my Joker.
So get involved. As you said earlier, as the defending champion, you're hoping everyone forgets to enter. And I'm suddenly top of the table, but we did so poorly that you could probably start right now. And if everyone who was already participating forgets to participate, you'll probably catch us. So do get involved. We'll be back either next week or the following week we'll at least get you our picks. But hang tight till then. Well, yeah, hang tight. It's just a week, or by the time you listen to this, less than a week until Premier League darts are back.